All right, before we get into it, a word from our sponsor. That's right. Our sponsor is that doughy-eyed bastard right there. That hopeful son of a bitch who has no idea the video he's going to make in a few short years, which is this video. So Bob Iger's come out with a book. What's it called? I don't know the name of the book. Bob Iger, My Journey, or something. Bob Iger, My Farts Smell Like Roses. I'm sure it's called that. And in one of these chapters in this book, the chapter, again, I don't know the name of the chapter, so we'll just call it That Time We Butt-Fucked George Lucas and then made him smile at our faces at Star Wars Celebration. Again, not called that. I'm making shit up. But this next part I'm not making up. In Bob Iger's book, Bob Iger, who's the CEO of Disney, for those of you who don't know, he's the guy who owns the Monopoly board. He's that kid you don't want to play with because you're like, you own everything. Fuck you. Anywhere I land, I'm screwed. Point is, Bob Iger straight up says George Lucas felt betrayed by what they did with Star Wars. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and put a link below where you can read the snippets, the paragraphs, get the gist. Basically, they were like, hey, Lucas, all right, we're buying this, and oh yeah, we'll keep you around as a consultant, which we knew. I actually made a joke about that back in the day when Disney bought it. It was like, oh, they're keeping him on as a consultant. Yeah, they're just going to push him to the back with a box of crayons. But like, yeah, stay over there. Feel bad now. I was being a dick. It's what I did back then. Story goes, George Lucas, when he was selling Star Wars to Disney for $4.5 billion or something, it was like 4 to 4.5. Point is, $4 billion is in there. He had outlines for episodes 7, 8, 9, and they were like, sweet, George, we will take those into account. We're totally not taking those into account. What he wants us to do and what we have to do are two very different things. And then when Lucas found out, like, wait a minute, you didn't go with my script ideas, Lucas felt betrayed. That's what he says. If your argument is, well, this stuff happens all the time in movies, you're right, it does. Or there are contracts and handshake agreements, and then people who don't follow through with those handshake agreements because the contract says they don't have to. The funny thing is, though, the fact that Bob Iger even has this in his book. Like, whose brilliant idea was this? Is it his? It just shows the disconnect between him and the rest of humanity. Was it like, all right, we need a Star Wars thing to get people jacked on Star Wars. So, all right, Bob Iger, release your book now where you kind of look like a dick when it comes to George Lucas and the deal. That'll get people thinking about Star Wars. That's a dumb PR move if that's what it was. In the end, I think it boils down to the fact that he doesn't think he looks like a dick. And he totally does. I feel like in Bob Iger's mind, who I can't read, I don't know the guy, I don't know his actual mindset, but the fact that he even released this thing is him going, but I didn't break the contract, so I don't feel like, I don't look like an asshole, right? Right? What the law says. Bill Burr has a great bit about that.
I'm sick of that shit. That's what the law says. 100 years ago, I could beat you with a fucking mop handle and be like, well, that's what the law says. Doesn't make us right.
Right. Just because you can do it because the contract says doesn't mean you're not an asshole if you do that thing. And George Lucas is no dummy, right? Like, he knew that it was a handshake agreement, that they were under no obligation to use his stuff. I also get that. The fact is, like, if you don't think Disney... If you don't think they were assholes through this whole thing, if you don't think they're being complete douchebags, if you don't think they're shitheads, then you can't ever think your boss is being an asshole for anything boss-like or business-related that your boss does, legally speaking. Like, here's a scenario. All right, it's your anniversary. You ask for your boss to have your anniversary off, and your boss is like, promise you can have that. Well, you know what? Have the weekend off. Go on that trip that you've planned with your wife or husband or whoever. And then when the boss is making the schedule, nah, you don't get that weekend off. You bought your tickets. Everything's ready and planned to go, but no, you gotta work. Is your boss an asshole? Yes. More of an asshole than what Disney did with George Lucas? No. It's just an anniversary. There'll be another one. So if you roll with Disney, you gotta roll with any shithead boss you ever have without complaint. This is like the dick boss move of dick boss moves. But to me, it totally does show the disconnect. The fact that it's just so normal. Like, no, we'll just talk about it. So, like, that's Hollywood is not a hub of any higher morality. Hollywood is actually, they're douchebags. A lot of them. Because they're snakes, they're sharks, they're piranhas. And the loud fish in that one small pond called Los Angeles, called Hollywood, they're what? The spearheads of higher morality online? Basically, it shows that the mindset of Hollywood is, it's not what you do, it's what you say. Because you can lie to a guy's face and be like, well, the contract says so, like a real piece of shit. But if we find out you tweeted anything edgelord or fucked up 10 years ago, you know, words that don't actually hurt people, you will be fired because that's really harmful stuff. All right, on to lying to people's faces to obtain their intellectual property to make a buck. Yeah. Higher morality. What? Like, what? And the word is George Lucas wanted to delve deeper into midichlorians and the wills of the Force, you know, the quantum level of the Force, or at least microbiology, you know, which that might have been, who knows? Maybe it would have been shit. Maybe it would have validated midichlorians. Maybe it wouldn't have. But one thing I know for sure is we would have at least gotten something different, and at the very least gotten a cohesive story that had a clear beginning and a clear end and a path getting there. Like, what's the path now? No one knows. And no, all the shit in episode 9, the Emperor coming back, it wasn't planned. No one will ever convince me it was planned. It's just damage control. And again, it's damage control using shit from the original trilogy to get people back on board with Star Wars. And sorry, that worked with The Force Awakens, but it's not going to work now. There were a few ways people processed Disney's Star Wars. There were people who were out the gate were like, no, Force Awakens is just a waste of time. It's just a retread. I've always been a Force Awakens apologist because I was like, well, I understand why they did that. We'll come back to that in a second. And then The Last Jedi hit, and there were people like, nope, not at all. This is fuck that shit. Then there was me like, but let me process. Things are they're fine, right? And then time goes on and you're like, no, things are not fine. And then there are people who are still like, nah, it's all good. Things are fine. And what pisses me off most about this is we all thought that The Last Jedi was the anomaly. That was the big betrayal of characters, right? But no, it wasn't. It was The Force Awakens from the get-go. So it changes the context of The Force Awakens. It changes the context of everything. It didn't start with The Last Jedi. It started with The Force Awakens. By its very inception, it was a betrayal to George Lucas and what he wanted. I'd have been such a Force Awakens apologist because I've been like, well, no, I understand why they did it that way. And it pisses me off because now I look at me in my review back then and I just get sad. Yeah, you sit there with your fucking smile. It'll come to you. In the end, hats off to Disney for the brilliant chess move that they did. Because you know that conversation happened. All right, we're totally not going to use George Lucas' script. Fans will find out one day. And they'll be pissed if they don't just see it on screen. What do we do? Well, sir, we could just have the lead be a strong female character. If anyone criticizes it, they're just sexist assholes. Brilliant. So here we are. What a fucking mess. And we would have gotten a universe. Like a universe that we can connect with, that we know how it works. Like what's the galaxy like in the Disney Star Wars movies? What's it actually like? Like an original trilogy, we had the Empire. That was simple enough. We all knew that. It's an empire and a rebellion. The Empire is the super government that the rebellion's trying to stop. In the prequels, we had the Republic. It's very clear. It's a huge part of all of it. What's the government like in Disney Star Wars? I don't know. What's it like? Like there was a republic that was wiped out by this super death laser from a planet. But as I understand, Coruscant wasn't one of the planets that blew up. So is there still Coruscant? Don't give me that shit about one of the books that explained it. I'm sure one of them had to have by now, but I shouldn't have to ingest the books to understand the movies. That's my point. Point is, if you're just going on Disney Star Wars movies, you feel like the First Orders, it's kind of like ISIS. There's just like this rabble of terrorists, and they're fighting a smaller rabble of rebels, or resistance, because we can't call them rebels because they'll probably owe George Lucas money. That's also a huge thing. Yeah, I don't think the Mandalorian's actually Boba Fett, because if the Mandalorian was Boba Fett, there's probably something saying they owe George Lucas some form of merchandise rights because he created the character of Boba Fett. So yeah, I think Disney Star Wars will make the Mandalorian his own character because they don't want to pay George Lucas anything. Kind of compromises the whole thing about the Mandalorian, doesn't it? Fuck 'em. So you have this group of terrorists, the First Order, and a smaller group of rebels or resistance, and they're fighting. But what are they fighting for? Who runs the galaxy? It doesn't look like the First Order does. Is there a bigger government that's like, the First Order and the Resistance, they're fighting again in this podunk off-ass planet? It doesn't really concern us, so back to business. Legislation. Like, does it even matter what they're doing? It just kind of feels like it's this no government Wild West Mad Max-ish galaxy. Slowest car chase ever. So yeah, I have my thoughts. In the end, all of this boils down to the fact that regardless of your sentiment of the prequels, and I do think time has validated the prequels. In the eyes of the fandom, anyway, you might not like the prequels. I prefer the original trilogy myself, but in the eyes of the fandom as a whole, the prequels have been validated through time. Because dialogue aside, to its core, that there was something there. It all just came at the right time for me. All of this has. I rewatched the prequels. I watched Bram Stoker's Dracula, which after watching Bram Stoker's Dracula, it's like, it hit me like a bolt of lightning. Like, oh my God, that's what he was trying to do with Anakin. Anakin is Dracula, essentially. This legendary war soldier, and then the woman he loves dies, and he just snaps and gives himself over to being the right hand of the devil, essentially. In the end, he's a victim of his own choices. And after seeing Bram Stoker's Dracula recently, I understood, I got it. Would have liked that to have happened in episode 2, and episode 3 just been Vader being a badass wrecking Jedi. But I digress, the concept hit me and I understood it. There's no such poetry in the new Disney Star Wars movies. That's just not there. And it could have been had they followed George Lucas's guideline. I mean, he's a great visionary, right? Like his concepts, his world building, it's amazing. His script writing, so you get someone else to write the script based off of his ideas. They could have had something special, something that would have stood the test of time. In the end, I feel like Disney was just two-faced with George Lucas because they wanted to make a quick buck, and they did. They made a quick buck. Well played, but you're dicks for it. Fact is, who can blame him? Who can blame him for selling it? Who can blame Disney for fucking him over like that? I mean, shit, assholes like me got on camera, said, George Lucas and his prequels, yeah, Disney's gonna do their own thing. It's gonna be awesome. We paved the way for them. We validated them. We gave them the green light. I mean, I can't speak for everybody. I feel like I did, though. Anyhow, George Lucas, I'm sorry. I mean it. I say things with a smile a lot of times. I can't imagine what that feels like. I can't imagine what it feels like to have someone smile at your face and tell you the important thing is to respect these characters, or however Kathleen Kennedy said it.
The main thing is to protect these characters. Make sure that they still continue to live in the way that you created them.
In the end, we're not going to follow your outline for that, and they're all going to die. A lot of them are anyway. But hey, making way for new characters. Fact is, regardless of your sentiment on George Lucas and his handling of the prequels, or the original trilogy, his constant meddling of the original trilogy, adding shit here and there, I have my thoughts on all of that. But regardless of all of that, this is the father of Star Wars, and he deserved better. That's fair. God, now it's dawning on me. I just said, he deserved better than $4 billion. I don't know. Maybe I'm a simple guy, you know? Like, I'm not a corporation. I'm not a corporate guy. I'm just me. And I try to just minimize my life and live a simple, happy life. And in the end, integrity matters. Like, keeping your word to somebody, it matters. And a lot of artists out there, I've heard the grievances of artists who don't own their music. It's actually the corporation that does. And it's everybody who's had that happen to them. The common denominator is they're like, it feels like, in a sense, it's your brainchild. They own a part of you. Maybe with his billions, he'll get over it. I just think integrity matters. Also important to humor the idea that maybe this is Bob Iger apologizing to Lucas. Like, maybe this is his way of doing it. I haven't read the whole book, just the snippets that have to do with this, but he does say he could have handled this better. So maybe that's his way of saying, sorry, George Lucas. Maybe he called George Lucas up and has said privately, hey, sorry, George Lucas. You know, maybe that's happened. Maybe they've broken bread. Maybe they're like, hey, it's cool. We're on beaches and we're rich now and we're going to be fine. But undeniably, the Star Wars sagas that we got under Disney Star Wars is not the one that Lucas planned for us to have. All right, so all of this whole George Lucas Disney situation, and the fact that Bob Iger put it in a book 3 months before the new movie comes out, the new Star Wars movie. Like, it's not going to just be on people's minds. Like, when I'm watching The Rise of Skywalker, I'm not going to sit there and be like, George Lucas didn't want any of this shit. He wanted none of this. That's another thing that he would have done differently that he just totally didn't want you dicks to do that you dicks totally did. Like, it's not gonna creep into our brains somehow. What do you think about it? Whatever you thought, comment below, let me know. And as always, if you like what you've seen here and you want to see more, click right here to see more.